In the archives of the Royal Photographic Society, a curator's white-gloved fingers pause over a glass plate, negative dated March 1905. The image shows a Victorian parlor, every detail crisp, the ornate wallpaper, the Persian rug, the mahogany furniture. But where people should stand, only shadows remain, not blurred figures from movement, not ghostly traces of long exposures, but perfect human shadows cast upon walls and floors by bodies that aren't there. The negative hasn't been damaged. The emulsion remains intact. The shadows exist without their makers, as if the people themselves were selectively dissolved from reality while their darkness persisted. This is not an isolated anomaly. From London to New York, from Paris to St. Petersburg, thousands of portrait photographs from 1905 share this impossible characteristic: shadows without sources, darkness without form, evidence of presence coupled with absolute absence. The portraits arrive in waves at restoration laboratories, family albums discovered in attics, estate collections donated to museums. Each photograph tells the same impossible story. A wedding portrait shows the shadow of a bride against cathedral steps, but the bride herself is gone. A family gathering captures the shadows of children playing on a lawn, while the lawn remains empty of everything but darkness. Industrial photographs document factory floors where shadows of workers fall across machinery that no hands operate. The chemical composition of these images defies explanation. Silver halide crystals that should have reacted uniformly to light show selective activation, as if certain wavelengths corresponding to human flesh, clothing, and features simply failed to register. Yet the shadows, those absence of light, recorded perfectly, suggesting the people were simultaneously there and not there when the shutter opened. The first mystery crystallizes in the pattern of disappearance. Not everyone vanished from these photographs. Certain individuals remain fully visible, while others beside them exist only as shadows. A businessman sits clear and solid at his desk, while his secretary's shadow hovers beside him, without body. A mother holds a visible infant, while her older children manifest only as dark shapes on the nursery floor. The selection appears neither random nor technical. Those who remain visible share no obvious common trait. They span all ages, genders, social classes. Those who vanished into shadow seem equally diverse, yet some criterion invisible to modern analysis, determined who would be preserved in silver and who would be reduced to darkness. The silence of official records speaks volumes. The British census of 1901 recorded 41.5 million inhabitants. The census of 1911 shows 45.2 million. But examination of parish records, tax rolls, and employment registers for the years between reveals massive discrepancies. Entire neighborhoods listed in 1904 directories show no inhabitants by 1906. Factory employment rolls that listed thousands of workers in early 1905 show skeleton crews by year's end, with no records of dismissals, deaths, or departures. Ship passenger manifests show vessels departing full and arriving empty, or arriving full of passengers who never appear in any subsequent documentation. The bureaucratic infrastructure that tracked every birth, death, and movement simply falls silent about millions of people who were there and then weren't. The suspicion grows when examining the behavior of contemporary institutions. Banks quietly wrote off thousands of accounts in late 1905, declaring account holders administratively deceased without death certificates. Insurance companies paid out life insurance claims en masse without investigating, without requiring proof of death, as if they knew investigation would yield nothing. Property transfers executed themselves through legal mechanisms that shouldn't have existed, moving ownership from people who vanished to people who remained without sale, inheritance, or any documented transfer. The Postal Service destroyed millions of undelivered letters in 1906, letters addressed to people at addresses that still existed but where no one remained to receive them. The investigation launches from an unexpected direction, the nascent science of photographic chemistry. In 1905, several major photographic suppliers simultaneously changed their emulsion formulas. Kodak, Agfa, and Ilford all introduced new, improved processes in January 1905, claiming better sensitivity and clarity. But analysis of their patent applications reveals additions of compounds that had no beneficial photographic properties: silver selenide, mercuric sulfide, and most mysteriously, trace amounts of radium salts. These additions would have made the emulsion sensitive to something beyond visible light, something that might differentiate between categories of human beings invisible to the naked eye. The company's records from this period were destroyed in suspicious fires in 1906, 1907, and 1908, respectively. The first major discovery emerges from the Vatican secret archives, accidentally declassified in 2019. A report from the Papal Observatory dated September 1905 describes selective divine translation occurring globally. The document, written in Latin and marked with the highest level of ecclesiastical secrecy, details observations of people passing into shadow while maintaining physical interaction with the material world. The report concludes that certain human souls were being recalled while their physical bodies continued to function, creating shadow beings that persisted for exactly 7 months before complete dissolution. The Church's response was to suppress all discussion and destroy any evidence, fearing mass panic if the faithful learned that souls could be harvested while bodies remained. The scope expands through telegraph records that survived in duplicate. Communications between government agencies in 1905 reference the selection, the harvest, and population adjustment protocols. The British Foreign Office cabled its embassies worldwide asking for counts of Category A versus Category B populations, terms that appear nowhere in official diplomatic vocabulary before or after 1905. The German Ministry of the Interior issued secret directives for managing shadow populations in major cities, establishing special administrative zones where the partially departed could be contained until complete transition. The United States Department of War mobilized troops to maintain order in cities experiencing massive categorical departures, but kept no records of what actions were taken or why. The clash with established history becomes unavoidable when examining the photographic evidence against written records. Official histories describe 1905 as a year of revolution in Russia, labor unrest in America, and colonial expansion in Africa. But the photographs tell a different story. Images from the Russian Revolution show shadow crowds in Palace Square, their darkness filling the space while only a handful of solid figures stand among them. American labor strikes appear to consist of mostly shadows, picketing against skeleton crews of visible workers. Colonial photographs from Africa show European administrators governing populations that exist only as shadows on the ground, darkness without form that somehow still worked, moved, and lived. The second layer of mystery emerges in the children. Every photograph of children from 1905 shows a disturbing pattern. Those under the age of 7 remain fully visible, while older children increasingly manifest as shadows. By adolescence, the shadow rate reaches nearly 60%. Adult photographs show an almost even split between the solid and the shadowed, but most disturbing are the photographs of the elderly, where those over 70 appear exclusively as shadows, without a single exception found in thousands of examined images. This age correlation suggests not random selection, but systematic harvesting based on some quality that accumulated with age, something that made older souls more valuable or necessary for whatever process was occurring. The mapping of the unknown reveals geographic patterns that defy political boundaries. The shadow people appear most concentrated in ancient cities, Rome, Constantinople, Jerusalem, Angkor Wat, regardless of contemporary political control. New World cities show lower rates of shadow population with the exception of pre-Columbian sites, where shadow rates match those of the Old World. Rural areas show almost no shadows, while industrial centers show moderate rates. The pattern suggests connection not to human activity, but to something deeper, older, perhaps to the accumulated psychic weight of millennia of human habitation. The shadows gathered where humanity had been longest, as if drawn to or created by the residue of countless generations. The central paradox manifests in the functionality of the shadow people. Contemporary accounts, when carefully read, describe no disruption in daily life during 1905. Factories continued to operate, shops remained open, governments functioned, yet the photographs clearly show that half or more of the visible population had been reduced to shadows. These shadow beings apparently continued their roles, their relationships, their responsibilities, despite existing in a state that photography could only capture as darkness. They cast shadows but had no substance. They affected the world but left no direct image. They were present in every way except the one that mattered to Silver Halide. They had no reflection of light, only its absence. The mechanical structures of society adapted without acknowledgement. Transportation systems that should have been overwhelmed by the sudden reduction in visible operators continued to function. Telegraph networks maintained by shadow operators transmitted messages without interruption. Ships crewed by shadows navigated the oceans, their logs written in hands that cast no reflection in photographs but left ink on pages. The infrastructure of civilization operated through a workforce that existed in a state between presence and absence, maintaining the physical world while fading from it. Documentation from the period shows gradual adjustments, scheduling changes to accommodate reduced crews, modifications to equipment for simplified operation, but never acknowledgement of why these changes were necessary. The dual realities compared reveal two parallel worlds occupying the same space. In one, the visible world, perhaps 30% of the original population continued as before. In the other, the shadow world, the remaining 70% existed in a state of gradual dissolution, maintaining their roles while slowly fading from physical existence. The photographs capture the moment of overlap, when both realities were visible to the chemical eye of the camera, if not to human perception. Contemporary accounts describe no awareness of the shadows among the solid population, as if the human mind simply edited out what it couldn't comprehend, seeing full people where only shadows remained. The hypothesis forms through accumulated evidence. The year 1905 marked a planned culling of human consciousness, a harvest of developed souls for purposes that remain obscured. The selection criteria wasn't random, but based on some quality of consciousness that photography could detect through the modified emulsions introduced that year. Those selected didn't immediately vanish, but entered a transitional state, continuing their earthly functions while their essential being was extracted or translated elsewhere. The shadows in the photographs aren't absence, but presence in a different state, caught between dimensions, visible only as the darkness they cast, while their substance existed elsewhere. Contradictory evidence appears in the anomalous photographs, images where shadow people appear solid but the normally visible appear as shadows. These reversed images, found exclusively in photographs taken during solar eclipses in 1905, suggest that the selection process could be inverted under specific conditions. The eclipse photographs from Sumatra, Spain, and Egypt all show the same reversal, the shadowed becoming solid, the solid becoming shadow. This suggests not elimination but transformation, not death but translation to a different state of being. The process was reversible, or at least observable from the opposite perspective, when cosmic conditions aligned correctly. The global context emerges through colonial records that speak more freely about native populations than about European citizens. British administrators in India reported entire villages entering shadow state. Simultaneously, French colonials in Indochina documented mass translucency events among indigenous populations. Belgian authorities in the Congo described selective corporeal dissolution affecting specific ethnic groups more than others. These racist observations, while reprehensible in their framing, provide uncensored documentation of a phenomenon that was carefully hidden in metropolitan records. The shadow transformation was global, but its discussion was only permitted when describing lesser populations where the truth could be dismissed as primitive superstition. The emotional reflection pauses on the human cost of forgetting. Families that lost members to shadow state continued as if nothing had changed, their memories edited to exclude the impossible truth. Children who watched their parents fade into darkness were conditioned to remember them as having died naturally. Spouses who lived with shadow partners until their final dissolution were taught to believe they had been widowed earlier. The mass psychological manipulation required to maintain this illusion suggests capabilities far beyond the acknowledged technology of 1905. Someone or something could edit human memory as easily as destroying photographs, maintaining social stability while conducting a harvest of human consciousness. The climax arrives in the discovery of the transition date, October 13, 1905. On this single day, according to scattered records that survived destruction, the shadow people completed their transformation. Telegraph traffic spiked with reports of mass departures and spontaneous evacuations. Police records from major cities described streets suddenly empty of crowds that had been there moments before. Most tellingly, photographic studios worldwide reported that after October 13th, all photographs returned to normal. No more shadows without bodies, no more selective invisibility. The harvest was complete. Those selected had been fully translated to whatever destination awaited them, leaving only the unselected to continue earthly existence. The consequences cascade through the 20th century. The wars that followed, the unprecedented violence and upheaval, might be understood as the reaction of a humanity suddenly deprived of 70% of its developed souls. Those who remained were perhaps those deemed unready for translation, left to continue the harsh lessons of physical existence. The technological explosion that followed, radio, television, computers, might represent an attempt to fill the consciousness gap left by the departed, to create artificial awareness to replace the natural consciousness that had been harvested. Every aspect of modern civilization could be seen as compensation for a loss we've been conditioned to forget. Parallel evidence surfaces in indigenous traditions worldwide that speak of 1905 as the year of the taking, or when the Sky People collected their own. Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories encoded after 1905 describe shadow-walking ancestors who departed for the light country. Native American oral traditions reference the sorting of spirits that occurred when their grandparents were young. African griots sing of the year when shadows walked without bodies before returning to the star country. These traditions, dismissed as folklore, preserve the memory that official history erased, the memory of humanity's great division when some were taken and others left behind. The return to the core question brings a chill of recognition. The people who vanished from photographs in 1905 didn't vanish at all. They were selected, transformed, and translated to a different state of existence. The shadows captured in thousands of photographs represent the transitional state, the moment between selection and departure. The chemical anomaly wasn't an error, but evidence of a process beyond our understanding, a harvest of human consciousness that photography accidentally documented. The systematic destruction of evidence, the editing of memories, the rewriting of history all serve to hide this fundamental truth, that humanity was divided, and we who remain are the ones who weren't chosen. The temporal re-evaluation forces consideration of cycles. If 1905 represented a harvest, when was the previous one? When will the next one occur? Ancient texts speak of periodic gatherings and selections throughout human history. The Mayan calendar's cycles, the Hindu yugas, the Norse Ragnarok, all might reference this periodic culling of developed consciousness. The infrastructure for selection remains in place, dormant but ready. The photographic technology that accidentally revealed the 1905 harvest has been replaced by digital systems that can be completely controlled. When the next selection comes, will we even know it's happening? Or will we, like our ancestors, continue our daily routines while our neighbors dissolve into shadows? The reconstruction reveals the mechanism hidden in plain sight. The modified photographic emulsions of 1905 contained elements that resonated with human consciousness itself. The radium salts didn't improve photographic quality. They created sensitivity to what we might call the soul, the animating force that distinguishes the living from the merely biological. Those who appeared as shadows in photographs had already had their essential consciousness extracted or marked for extraction. Their bodies continued to function, animated by habit and biological programming, but their core being was already elsewhere. The photographs captured this truth that human eyes couldn't see, the presence of absence, the shadow cast by a soul already departed. The true purpose unveils itself through deduction. The harvest of 1905 wasn't destruction but collection, not death but transformation. The selected consciousness was gathered for purposes that remain beyond our understanding, perhaps to populate other worlds, perhaps to fuel processes we can't comprehend, perhaps to graduate to a higher form of existence. Those who remained, the visible ones in the photographs, were either unripe for harvest or designated to continue the human experiment on Earth. We are the descendants of the unselected, carrying forward a civilization deprived of its most developed souls, struggling to understand a world from which the wisest have been removed. The scientific analysis of surviving evidence reveals isotope patterns in the modified emulsions that shouldn't exist in nature. The radium salts show decay patterns, suggesting they originated not from Earth but from somewhere else, sometime else. The silver selenide compounds display crystalline structures that violate known chemistry. These impossible materials were introduced into photographic processes worldwide simultaneously, used for exactly 10 months, then disappeared completely. No examples of the modified emulsions exist after October 1905. The technology to create them has never been rediscovered. The knowledge of their true purpose was erased, along with those who understood it. The validation of authenticity becomes impossible when the evidence itself challenges reality. Every attempt to reproduce the shadow photographs using period-appropriate techniques fails. Modern analysis of surviving examples reveals no technical explanation for the selective invisibility. The shadows without sources violate the fundamental laws of optics. Yet thousands of these photographs exist, scattered across archives worldwide, too numerous to be hoaxes, too consistent to be accidents. They stand as monuments to an event we've been conditioned to forget, evidence of a selection we weren't chosen for, reminders that our reality is neither complete nor permanent. The motive for concealment transcends simple social control. If humanity understood that consciousness could be harvested, that souls could be selected and extracted while bodies continued to function, the entire foundation of civilization would collapse. Religion, philosophy, science, All depend on assumptions that the 1905 harvest proves false. We are not individual, indivisible beings, but components in a larger system that periodically collects its developed elements. The photographs reveal that we are crops, not farmers, and that our consciousness itself is the harvest. This truth was hidden not from cruelty, but from necessity. Those who remain must believe in their permanence to continue the cycle. The philosophical collapse arrives with the vertigo-inducing implications. If the shadow people of 1905 were conscious beings whose essence had been extracted for translation elsewhere, then consciousness itself is transferable, collectible, perhaps even consumable. The photographs document not just missing people, but the fundamental nature of human existence. We are temporary vessels for something that can be removed, selected, harvested. Every assumption about death, identity, and purpose must be reconsidered. The shadows in the photographs aren't absences, but evidence of presence elsewhere. Proof that what we consider ourselves is merely what remains after the valuable parts have been extracted. The closing monologue echoes through empty archives, where photographs wait in climate-controlled darkness, their shadows still visible, still unexplained, still terrifying in their implications. Somewhere in dimensions we cannot access, the consciousness of the selected may continue, evolve beyond our understanding. Looking back at the shadows they left behind with comprehension we cannot achieve. The photographs of 1905 stand as monuments to humanity's great forgetting, evidence of a selection we failed to qualify for, reminders that we are the residue of a process we've been programmed to deny. And in the silver halide crystals of those impossible images, the shadows still wait, cast by souls long departed, asking the question that echoes through the silence. When the next harvest comes, will we cast shadows too? Or will we simply disappear, leaving not even darkness to mark our passing from this temporary world?